I think more than anything, people need to understand why we sit where we sit. And we sit where we sit because we haven't had a change in government since 1997. Now, you don't need to take my word for it. There's a historian out there called David Starkey who is a mind of information, and he gets everything chronologically correct. So he's reliable and honest and conservative. You see, that's the bit that's been missing. Ever since Tony Blair's policies have been enforced ever since he left government. It started with David Cameron. He was proud to announce to the world that he was the heir to Blair. And he started it with his Big Society, David Cameron's Big Society. It was a left-wing initiative that he carried through with the Tories. And as I've said before, when Tony Blair was actually in number 10, I'm not going to say when he was in power because I still see him as being in power. He's got everything in place to be in that position. He changed the civil service, so all the people that are important within the civil service, the higher echelon of the civil service, were all placed there by him. They're his people. And they never move. They don't change when government changes. Government, the opposition never opposes much because the one that's in government is giving the opposition what the opposition wants anyway. They all want the same thing. It's globalisation. But a protagonist in all this that gets overlooked because, one, she wasn't in office very long, and two, she seemed to be a mild-mannered individual. But this is a very shrewdly powerful woman who is responsible for a lot of the things that people are blaming Keir Starmer for. This isn't being said in defence of Keir Starmer. This is an awakening. It's a wake-up call. Tommy Robinson is in jail because of laws that were brought in by the Tories, not Keir Starmer. Going back to the person I'm talking about, is Theresa May. When she claims the worst thing she ever did was run through a cornfield, she's done a lot worse than that. She's trailblazed through our constitution and changed the face of how this country runs forever. Her first massive change was introducing net zero into legislation. People won't realise the devastating effect that has. It's not necessarily the net zero, it's the fact it was written into law. The knock-on effect of that means that judges now sit and preside over our energy laws, i.e. whether we can drill or frack or dig. They decide. That this has resulted in Great Britain having the most expensive electricity in the world. Now, you can't blame Ed Miliband because he didn't introduce this as a law. He just picked up the gauntlet after the Tories left office. They introduced it. I'm amazed there's any Tory members left because whatever you think you're a member of, you're not. You're not a member of anything remotely conservative. Add to that, it was Theresa May who introduced the non-crime hate speech. And with that, she embraced diversity, equity and inclusion and critical race theory. It's all one big melting pot. That was Theresa May. She did that. It was Theresa May's legislation that viewed the Lawrence report as the Met Police being racist. It was Theresa May who brought all this to the front. She was never a conservative. Not in my view, not the way I see conservatism. So she's had so much influence on our country for a very short span in office, and one of the few people that hasn't had the good grace to clear off from politics. She's still sitting there. And unfortunately, the folly of Theresa May doesn't end there because it was brought up in a discussion about Ed Miliband fining car manufacturers for not making enough electric vehicles. Ed Miliband, in his defence, said to a Tory MP who was going on about it, he said to her, well, why are you blaming me? You brought it in. It was brought in under Theresa May. They're the laws. The Tories did it. And this is why you cannot look at them. You know, it doesn't matter that people voted for Labour. Because the Labour and the Tory party, it's a melee, it's a mix of the same thing. It's just that it's more noticeable with Starmer because he goes around, he's like watching someone on Strictly Come Dancing with a walking disability. It sticks out like a sore thumb because he's so wooden as a person. I mean, the first thing I would do if I was him, I'd be saying at every interval, don't blame me for this, the Tories brought the law in, but he hasn't got the common sense to instill that into you. He's there taking hit after hit. He's taking all the blame. And that will result in his party tanking support. The Tories should be tanking support right now. The Bruges Group, which is a Thatcherite think tank, very well funded, very sensible. A lot of their members have left and gone to Reform. And I said before that political parties aren't the be-all and end-all. They're not the answer to everything. They're only a stepping stone to getting what we want, which is proportional representation and direct democracy. We want the big stuff to come back to us. If you're going to start putting additives in cow feed, we want to know about it in an honest format, delivered in ways we can understand by a media that isn't doing narrative stuff. So we've a way to go. But the only way to go that way is to make sure that a party like Reform, who's already got a foot in the door, get more and more MPs who aren't part of this two-tier. It's a funnel, really. It's a blue funnel, or it's two hands of the same gloves, but one's got blue and one's got red. But they're not offering anything any different. And just to prove even more visibility that the Tories were never ever going to be conservative, even in recent months, David Starkey, the great historian, who's been cancelled by the way, manages to tell us in an interview that it was Michael Gove who got extracts of Tony Blair's memoirs and passed them around the Cabinet Office as basically a go-to workshop for how to do government. Michael Gove did that, allegedly a Tory. So when you see me making statements like Tony Blair runs this country, you can see the background as to why I think that he's a backstage player now, because it's a bit like a successful businessman retiring, isn't it? Because he's made enough money and he's got enough wealth and he doesn't need to worry anymore because everything he put in place is still in place, so he can take a back seat. So this is why I don't get overexcited about Keir Starmer. I'm not sat there going to bed at night thinking, oh, get Keir Starmer out. The petition was just a visible slap in the face, really, for the world to see that Britain's had enough. And Starmer's the one that's going to carry the can. But he's carrying the can on the back of a lot of other people. You've got to remember, when Theresa May was Prime Minister, she had Amber Rudd as a Home Secretary bringing in allegedly migrant children on a bus. And these children, a lot of them were shaving, they were 6 foot odd. One of them, in the foster home he was living in, actually showed one of the children that lived there pictures of his wife and child back home. He was going to school. So there's been so much gone on under the auspices of an alleged Conservative government, that Starmer being in doesn't worry me. Starmer being in is waking everybody up who thought they had a Conservative government, because you didn't. When you're there shaking hands, meeting Rishi Sunak, what were you really meeting? You were meeting another globalist puppet, because they're all steering this into one thing, which is a future where you count for less, you've no access to any authority, you will just be told how to live, what to do, where to spend your money, how to take a holiday if you're allowed to have one. They are trying to completely, finitely control our lives, and we can stop it. And we are stopping it, because everything we do pushes back. We should have all had a health passport by now. We should have all been part of the booster campaign. We should all be listening to the government. We should all be having electric cars. We should all be doing so many things which we're not. We shouldn't be using cash, but we are. Because we, as a collective, are too many in number. So remind yourself of this. Tommy Robinson sits where he sits because of a Tory initiative, not because of Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer's just using it So is Ed Miliband. They've had so little work to do. I said probably 12 months ago, there's never been an opposition. That's what's been missing in British politics, an opposition to government. Nobody's stood up to anything. So it's easy to just take over, isn't it? It's easy for Ed Miliband and Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer to slide into their office, because at the end of the day, they're not really changing very much. They've got free time to come up with even more legislation because the Tories left everything in place for them. And you need to recognise that. And that's why you shouldn't be losing any sleep over Starmer. Starmer's waking your neighbours up. Starmer's waking your colleagues up at work because they haven't followed politics at all and they didn't realise just how far the abyss we'd slipped.